Thank you all for joining us here. I'm Joseph Shimizi, Market Development Manager for Cinematic Live Production and Virtual Production at Sony Electronics. We've got an excellent panel for you guys today. Joining me shortly is the Vernacular Goats, and we'll be talking about a bunch of their projects that they've done, which is, as you see in the title here, turning extreme moments into cinematic experiences. Joining me on stage will be Aaron Cook. He's the founder of the Funicular Goats as well as the Digital Cinema Collective. We'll also have our cinematographer that was on Skyscraper Live. We'll have I'm gonna get my panels up here. Thank you, Aaron. We have Brett Lowell joining us here, who is our director of photography that was on Skyscraper Live. Derek Wochum, who is our technical manager with the Funicular Goats. Adam Leiterman, live colorist and DIT. So we'll get these guys out here. Come on in. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here, NEB 2026. I'm going to just jump right in. So I think if research tells me right, it was Tuesday in 2019 that this all came together. And for those that, might have been living under a rock for a little bit and not know who you guys are, the Vernacular Goats are the lead live production broadcast entity in the world, I would say, today. Their credits include things like the largest football games in the world, their halftime shows, live concerts, festivals. Their partners include Apple, Disney, Netflix, Google, Amazon, and HBO. And one of the most recent projects we're going to talk about today is Skyscraper Live, which has the credit of being one of the most technically challenging live shoots ever attempted in television. So, Aaron, with starting out, this is important, I want to get into how you choose your cameras, but before we even get to that, first most important thing are the people. How do you go about choosing your crew when you put together these crack teams?
I think it all just starts with chemistry, and James Coker and Morgan Kellum, my partners, they really have worked with cinematic crews and people that work in live their entire career, and I worked with a lot of live television engineers, and so really, it's finding like-minded technical and creative people that want to build these cinematic experiences, build something that's more than just, a capture, but, really put the extra work and effort into every camera chain, and, the audio capture, and really creating something that's, more than just a broadcast coverage, but a visual experience for the viewer.
So for those, who up here did you meet first?
Adam Leiterman and I worked together in the Disney parks going back to 2016, 2017. And so Disney holiday shows were some of our first multi-camera, non-live, cinematic shows that we were doing, where the original show had a truck, but we were doing second unit stuff deep in the park, and we had to create a fly pack that would be very mobile and deploy very quickly to attractions in the park. And so we created a cinematic fly pack that we could deploy to various parks very quickly. And that was one of the first fly packs that we created with Morgan and James. They were still, at their previous company. And so that was kind of what gave us the basis for how we wanted to build our system once we started working on it. And then Derek, we met, a couple years later, and Derek started working with us on those same Disney projects. And then more recently, Brett, this was the first time we worked together on Skyscraper Live, and he's a brilliant DP and has a lot of mountain climbing experience, and really was able to help develop the camera systems and the rigging systems and work with the riggers to develop the way that we would capture Skyscraper Live.
And then, so with that, when it comes to choosing your equipment, what's the thought process and the methodology? We were talking backstage. You've been in the Sony family basically since the beginning.
Yeah, I think Sony F55 really was the first platform that we were using live for live streaming, and it just was such a good platform for allowing us to do a cinematic capture with cinematic lenses, but also have the feeds that we needed for live broadcast. And then, these guys can tell you their experience with choosing cameras, but for Skyscraper, I think, Sony was the natural choice because we needed such a plethora of different types of cameras for the project.
Well, I know we'll get into the details of that in a little bit. So Brett, since this was your first time with the Goats, can you tell us what it was like getting involved from, normal cinematography to live cinematography for something like this?
Yeah, well, I come, more from a documentary world, so to work with these guys at Funicular Goats who have amazing knowledge and the platform to do large scale live broadcasts was great for me. I mean, I like to dabble in all the different areas of production, and so this particular project took a handful of specific specialists to come together. We had Funicular Goats who can run this amazing live broadcast. We had our rigging team, Remote Ropes, who bring an expansive knowledge of how to set up 400-meter haul systems for cable cams. Um, we had my team of high-angle cinematographers who have all worked with Alex Honnold and other world-class climbers over the years. And so everybody kind of brings their own specialty to this massive production. And it turned out great. And I learned a lot from these guys in terms of the live production workflow.
So has live bug bit you now? If you're ready to do it again?
Yeah, I think I got the bug.
So, Derek, you're tech manager on these projects. I mean, that's an incredible amount of responsibility for a project like this, specifically Skyscraper. I mean, with so many moving parts, what's your order of priority when you come into a project like this?
So we started, I don't know, it was like 6 months prior, right? So first off was just kind of getting a camera count and kind of general builds. I think we started working off like a rough plot where placements were going to be. So just kind of getting a count of equipment that we were both shipping and then finding in Taiwan because we couldn't really send everything. So there was a huge challenge there working with local vendors. After that, I kind of really focused on crewing. So with all the camera systems was a huge deal. Luckily, quite a few of the guys, couple of like our lead AC who I went to school with, knew a lot of the climbers and stuff. So I really was able to try to like blend the two worlds there and like get people that knew the climbers, knew operators. After that, it was big focus on the fiber layout in the entire building, which was a massive undertaking. At first plans, rough drafts, we had fiber outside the building, and then luckily was able to do it all on this massive stairwell that went all the way up the building, and then planning out each fiber drop, multi-dynes and wireless cameras, receivers, wireless mesh. And then after that, as we got closer, it came down heavily on scheduling because it is a working building. There's businesses throughout, so we can't go anywhere we want. We can't just go to a service level and finish our cabling. We have to go at certain times, and only a certain amount of people could go. We'd have to have a representative and stuff like that from the building. So it was a massive undertaking of scheduling just alone. To be honest, each day prior before work, I would do a whole schedule of where we're going because a lot of it I had to kind of had to do on the fly a little bit. I kind of found that scheduling stuff a month before just wasn't gonna work.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then I would tweak the camera plan on the building and be like, "Sorry, Derek, we got to move some fiber."
It was changing constantly, which was totally good because we set up things to be adaptable for all the climber one Alex, but also all your operators. So it worked out pretty well, and we really couldn't have done anything without remote ropes and the climbing operators with all their experience and working at heights.
How much redundancy can you build into a project like this?
So there was another tech manager, I'd like to mention Mike Anderson, who worked at the trucks and engineering. And then I was primarily in the building, but numerous fiber, I think there was some 36 miles, you did the math or something like that.
5 miles of TAC 12, 36 miles.
So everything was redundant fiber-wise and devices for sending signals back down to the trucks. And then even at the trucks, every device was all redundant. Yep.
Got it. So, let's see what we got here. So then Adam, colorist, DIT, without you, it doesn't mesh. So when you come at a project like this or other projects, are you able to have a uniform color theory and pipeline that you bring to these projects, or is it per project that you like to build?
Yeah, so I like to go to each project and create a specific look for that project starting from scratch. I think that each project deserves its own look. But I still have, my own tools that I have in my own pipeline that kind of unified to make sure that I'm working through stuff quickly to make sure that I can actually get to the final look. Um, with this specific one, we had a variety of cameras. We had, Puranos, we had FR7s, we had some Sony broadcast cameras, and I think we had a red in the helicopter camera. So, while cameras have to match, we do have one unified look that's for the show, and then we also had a unified look for the studio, which had to look a little bit different.
And with that, are you a color box guy for a workflow? Are you an RCP guy? Or are you a mix of the two?
Yeah, so I originally came from the narrative world, so I created a lot of looks in in Resolve, and I would color grade and post. So I took a lot of everything that I learned from the post world, and we brought that to live. So I like to use RCPs for camera control, and then I like to create looks in Resolve and through a variety of other tools to then put them into an app called Live Grade that then puts the LUTs into our LUT boxes for the image processing.
And how long for you does that take in terms of a pre-production to be ready for Brett to start taking a look at the looks and give his feedback?
So, it all depends on lighting, right? On a typical, live show, we will do rehearsals and I'll start ingesting all of that footage and log and create the looks, and I'll iterate on that look and I'll work with lighting. With a show like this, we're out in the elements. So we're at whatever the sky was giving us, whatever the weather was giving us. And the whole week, we were actually raining. So, you know, we weren't even sure if we were going to do the show because of the rain. But if it was going to be cloudy, it was going to be one look, and if it was sunny, it was going to be another look. So I had to build up a variety of looks based on the footage that was coming in, and be able to estimate, oh hey, if it's going to be cloudy, we wanted to maybe add a little bit extra contrast, just to make it more surreal, more visceral, because it's a big challenge of Alex climbing this building. And then if it was sunny, maybe lower the contrast a little bit because the light on his face would be too much. So we had to have those ready to go based on what the environment was giving us.
And was this HDR or standard dynamic range, how you did the project?
This show is SDR, though we do work with HDR and other types of shows like Super Bowl halftime and stuff like that. So
excellent. So then, I think in prep for our conversation, I did try to look up, what are the most complicated shots in television projects that have been done, and it's a good list. And the goats are on there twice, at least, for it.
We're honored.
I think you're up against the Apollo moon landing, the time Prince got rained out at the Super Bowl, the time you flew Rihanna,
yeah.
50 feet in the air at a Super Bowl. And Felix Baumgartner's Stratus jump was also up there on that list. So 400 meters, single shot. I think we actually have a little bit of a behind the scenes that we can take a look at for a second, just to give a sense of, if you guys haven't had a chance to see the BTS for Skyscraper Live, we're going to roll it in about a second. You guys can take a look, and then we'll talk about what we're looking at. So we have a couple of shots here. That's you from the bottom looking up. About how high are you up at that point on this one? About
That's actually really quite low, maybe 250 feet off the ground there.
Quite low. If we want to move to the next shot, yeah, we have a couple of these. Let's move to the next one as well, because I get anxiety looking at them. There's a beautiful shot there. Move on to the next one, please. So here's an example of one of the rigs. And I believe that you weren't allowed to actually affect the physical structure at all. You can't tack down or anything like that. So how did these come to be? How did you end up designing them?
Yeah, well, we were limited by the building's approval and what we were allowed to rig, and so we ended up going with the remote ropes guys' haul system. They were lightweight, as you can see. Those are called gin poles, and they're setting up two different haul systems. The one in the foreground was the one that I rode, shooting handheld for 400 meters, tracking Alex the whole way up. And the one on top of the parapet there was the cable cam rig. And a similar system. They were both operated by drill-powered winches, actually. And without the remote ropes guys and kind of me telling them what I'm looking for cinematically and working together to kind of find the right angles, um, we had that kind of redundancy of the two, me and the cable cam, which is needed in live production and offered kind of slightly different angles and looks. Um, but yeah, I mean, we were there for 2 weeks before the live event happened, working out all of these kinks and rigging solutions. So.
Was it rigging first, shot second, or shot first, then we figure out the rigging?
Well, there was only so much variation we could do with the rigging, so we started there, and then I would be like, "Hey guys, can we make this tweak, or how can we slide the rig over a little bit more so I can be more profile?" Little tweaks like that. But yeah, it went amazingly smooth. Unfortunately, the winds picked up like crazy, and I'm sure if you watch the broadcast, you can see me swinging around out in space, and so I had to make some additional tweaks on the fly as the weather changed and the winds got stronger. In terms of, I don't know, you could see me holding back here. I had to take some of the vibration out of the rope system with my arm by locking off with my arm on my pulleys. The wind was whipping the 400-meter ropes, and then it was transferring through, which wasn't happening on the practice days because we didn't have that kind of wind. So, it was just adapting and doing what you can.
And you had the Burano. That's where you were shooting at that time.
Yeah, all of the on-building cameras were Buranos. That's my friend Savannah there on one of the tripod angles on a Burano. It seemed like the right camera for those positions. One thing I always look for when I'm shooting rock climbing is, I want the camera stripped down as much as possible and as few things that can potentially fall off. And so, I never use matte boxes on cameras when I'm shooting high angle, things that could touch the rope and fall and potentially hurt somebody. So having, built-in ND on the Burano and built-in image stabilization, because I actually wasn't on a gimbal. And so, it was a great camera for the need.
And with aside from the camera lens makes a picture, camera just records it. So how did you go about choosing your lensing for such a project like this?
Well, I talked with Aaron a bunch actually about lensing, and we landed on the Duvo Fujinons. The focal range is amazing on these things. I mean, I think I was on the 14 to 100, and then there's the 24 to 300. And so for, in these situations where you're not going to be swapping lenses in the middle of live production, the guys on the tripods are actually leapfrogging. So as Alex would climb past the first tripod on a parapet, those operators would then pop the camera off those sticks. They would hand it down to a rigger/AC, and they would go into the building and have to find their way to the right elevator and navigate to their next location, get up on the parapet, drop their camera back on, and be ready for Alex to come past. So we only had 6 operators, and there was, 12 floors or something that we had to pass. So, yeah.
Yeah, we started, honestly, one of the first, we were on a few group conversations. Plimsoll out of the UK and James Smith and his team, the executive producers of the show, kind of pulled all of us together, this group of folks. And, one of the first conversations that I had with Brett, I called him like, "Hi, my name's Aaron Cook, and I'm going to be in your business more than you're used to because, I'm a producer that likes to be involved in the cinematography of it." But we had a really great conversation, and I explained to him, the thought of using the Sony cameras and the Duvo lenses for this base level of coverage, so we had consistency among the cameras. And, it was a really great conversation, and he was very receptive to my, input. And so it was already just like a very good collaboration from that point, where we were figuring it out with all of the technical team, with all of the different producers that had a stake in it. And we really just developed on a really great level of base coverage. And then we were able to work in other little, lensing options and things as it came up. Like, for example, the FR7s were a different choice, obviously.
And Adam, how is it for you coloring through the Duvos? I talked to some other colorists. They seems to be a fairly easy time.
No, I really actually enjoy those lenses, and we use them pretty often. So they're fun to grade through. Yeah.
Is there any trick to it? I mean, maybe not give away too much special sauce, but
To grade those lenses specifically, no. I generally, I create the look based on what I'm seeing. So whatever I'm getting, I'm just making it look as good as possible.
and do
So.
you do any screw-on filtration, any polarizers, anything like that when you're going into it, or?
Well, I mean, for this specific show, we couldn't do polarization because we couldn't put it on the lenses. But it all depends on what the DP usually wants and what we usually do for the show. But I do like the fact that it is on the softer side of broadcast style zooms, but it is a city broadcast zoom. So, yeah.
Got it.
The biggest thing on like the Browno choice with the Duvos was that it kind of fit the bill of what we typically use on the cinematic multi-camera stuff and broadcast, and then with what the operators would be comfortable with, and like getting points from Brett and like how to build them out. That was the biggest mesh that worked out really well.
And then for us when we're controlling the cameras, we need lens control, and the fact that those had servos on the side of the zoom, if we had motors, depending on how these camera operators are and where they are in this remote location, if that motor popped off, we lost control. So we wanted them to operate, and we wanted to be able to control it. The servos were the best choice for that, along with the fact that Alex was sometimes really far away, and the operators could easily just pop into the the 1.5 by expander mode. And even on the Buranos, I think we even cropped into like a like 4K at some points just to get even closer for a tighter shot of him.
And then from the PTZ nature of it, you had the FR7s. I believe that some of the top shots there, I think, were FR7s. How did control and color for those factor into it?
I mean, if anything, those are easier to control because we have full control. And those are some of my favorite shots of the shot where he's on top of the spire and the PTZ's looking right up at him. So the perfect light for it, and the blue sky, and yeah, they were great. And it was something that Aaron and I actually fought for, because I don't think that they originally wanted to put those cameras in, or maybe we're going to put some type of still camera or some other
Well,
broadcast
Derek
style.
can kind of tell you about the technical challenges, because we wanted a waterproof housing up there, but we really pushed for the FR7s,
Yeah, we kept
and Derek had
pushing
to.
FR7s to keep them up there, and like you saw the remote guys going up there with rigging, and I mean the rigging alone was, we all had ideas and going in wanted somebody to kind of take control of like, oh, this is how it's going to be. But really, Brett just went to a grip house there, grabbed some stuff, and we made it happen. And then those guys went out there and rigged it. And then we had one of our second ACs, Matt Leslie, went up with some of those guys to really fax out the camera at the top. And that thing sat up there for 4 or 5 days in the rain. And we saw it maybe one time in that time period before the live show. And they held strong.
I think, didn't we have to have someone go up and defog it?
Yeah, somebody had to go up a couple times just to double check. But even getting that window on a skyscraper that large in weather is very difficult. Yep.
And that was a creative decision that James and I made to have remote cameras on the summit and just below, so that there wouldn't be any operators kind of crowding him and taking away from that cinematic moment of him alone on the summit.
Just so you guys know, the FR7 is not water rated. It is robustly built. So with the project like this, and this is a great final shot, what would you do differently if you could do it again?
I mean, I learned a lot from this production, and there is a handful of tweaks that I would make to improve the shots. And you always learn when you go through something like this. Might actually have next time would have a Rialta, maybe instead just for my camera, which could be then put on a tiny handheld gimbal. But yeah, I mean, little things like that I learned along the way. Different ways to tweak the rigs to stabilize them even more. But overall, I was super happy with how it came out, and the teams, everybody was just so amazing to work with.
And I know we were talking, focusing on the visual, but without cinematic audio, It's also, and I wanted to ask you, what was the audio approach to actually miking something like this? Hard enough to shoot it, let alone make you feel the sound of being in that space.
Yeah, I mean, Jacob Smith, our audio partner at Night Owl Sound, really mapped this out. And kind of to go back to your other question first about what would we do different, the, just like every project, we had budget constraints and budget challenges, and we made a lot of sacrifices that nobody will ever know to get this to work and to get the coverage that we needed. 8-bit, transmitters for wireless cameras. We had 9 wireless cameras, which is also amazing to have that many cameras on this show. And so we were making sacrifices along the way just to keep it moving forward and keep it look the way that we wanted it to look. And some of that was audio. We wanted to blanket the entire building with RF audio and have, redundancy with audio. And we couldn't afford it. It was going to be too cost prohibitive to cover this entire building with RF audio. So Jacob came up with some really brilliant solutions to hop Alex's RF microphone to the cameras. And then we used a cell phone. He had a cell phone that we used for everything. We used it for his in-ear comms. We used it for his backup microphone. We were using it to play his music through. So Jacob kind of helped with everybody to develop the way that we did it. And that alone was very brilliant. And just there was a lot of ingenuity that went into how we were able to capture the audio. And it was brilliant because you could listen to Alex just talking to Brett throughout the entire climb, and we've never experienced that. Nobody at home's ever even thought about that. For you guys, it was normal, but that was something new to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was new to me too. I wasn't quite expecting so much of his conversation, but I think I learned that people really like behind the scenes, and I went into this kind of thinking, okay, how are we going to camera block and keep keep each other out of our shots, and then quickly learned just from some of the tests and Netflix people that were like, oh, we want to see you in the shot. People loved seeing me on the side of the building being hauled next to him. They didn't want to crop me out, learning things like that. And I never thought that people would be so interested in what Alex had to say while he's climbing. But, one of the complaints I heard was, the announcers were stepping on Alex's words. I wanted to hear what Alex was saying. And so, yeah, I mean, all things that I learned along the way, too.
So I had a couple of folks when I was talking about we're going to have this panel, and one of the questions I was asked to ask was, why no drones? In a world of drones, why no drones on this one?
No, we had drones. We had multiple drones. Problem was we were limited by air traffic control. So the drones could only go to 400 feet, and they couldn't be in the air while the helicopter was in the air. So we had all of these restrictions that we had to work around.
Understood. Now, given as much experience as you guys have, looking towards the future, what is, as you see cinematic live, I mean, live is everywhere here at the show. It seems to be the buzzword of 26. What do you see, what would you like to see coming in the future as cinematic live develops? Now, I guess you guys have a hand in actually charting that course a bit, but going forward, what would you think you can see on the horizon, or would you like to see coming on the horizon?
I mean, I'm excited about new lensing, like the Canon 12, I think it's the 12 to 55 is their new lens. I'm excited to test that out and try that. I'm excited for all the new opportunities. We're still kind of just breaking into different areas of live that are, people are approaching us and looking to explore cinematic for their event, whether it's a soccer game or whether it's, it's so many different things. So the opportunity and the engagement with live fans, live events, live experiences because of AI is, it feels like it's cool again to be live, and that's what's exciting to us.
Yeah, I mean, as a climbing cinematographer and somebody who's often hiking away out into the wild places, I'm always looking for, ways to trim down my kit, whether it's weight or less glass to carry. I've always had this dream piece of glass that I'm waiting for somebody to make that's like a 18 to 300, 1.4, really small, really sharp. Yeah, so when that comes out, I'll be excited.
How about you, Derek?
I'm not going to steal any of your, probably what you would say, but I think to me, some of the coolest stuff coming out is all camera control and lens control stuff, like with Cyan View, which we use quite a bit. I don't get my hands on it enough to really learn a lot of it. from show to show, but Adam always is, and like it's a pretty cool world where all that stuff is going. But yeah.
Yeah, unified camera control is a really big thing. But there's something that I want to touch on because you asked, what would you do differently, and that also tells into what I want to see for the future. So, Aaron mentioned having 8-bit on this project because of budget constraints, and so you could actually see, actually stepping in the sky from the lack of bit depth, and that's from having to push the image so far to get the look that we wanted. Unfortunately, that's what we did. And so, what I would really like to start seeing is processing in the camera, live processing, so 16-bit processing to get the extreme looks that we want to get that we would be able to get in post, but do it in camera live instead of going through image processors and working on a 10-bit 422 image.
Live raw.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sounds like trying to wash your hair in a waterfall. But no, stay tuned for it. And then, Aaron, sure, a lot of folks come to you. If you were to give any advice to folks that are looking to endeavor on their own getting started in cinematic live, if you were talking to a producer or anybody above the line, what would be something you'd wish they knew in advance coming into a space like this, trying to accomplish something like this?
I think it sounds abstract when you say like cinematic live. Like, what does it mean? And to me, it's really, just paying extra attention to every camera chain. It is the tools, having the right tools. It's how we integrate the cinema cameras, the lenses, the lighting, the LUTs. It's the entire workflow. But it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. If you have an event and you want to kind of explore it or bring it into it, you can do it one camera chain at a time. It's like there's a way to kind of test the waters, because that's how we do everything at Funicular Goats and DCC, and the way that we've worked. It's like, let's test one camera chain on one project, and when we're confident that it works, then we'll expand it on the next project. And so I think that's it. It doesn't have to be some big leap of faith. It's like, find out for yourself, test the waters for yourself, learn about it, read about it, call me, call people, ask questions, and just start to kind of test it out on your projects, because it's always going to give you something new as a producer to lean into when you're looking for extra areas of creativity.
Oh, I think it's excellent. Well, Aaron, Brett, Derek, Adam, thank you so much for your time here. We really appreciate it. And please stay tuned for our next event. It'll be coming up in a short little bit. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.